Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I am Khadim Ali, and I'm coming from Quetta. And when I was in Quetta, my grandfather used to teach me Farsi at home. It was homeschooling was done in Farsi. And then he told me that people, all the scholars of Afghanistan, or the top scholars of Farsi from 18th and 19th centuries, they used to go to Lahore to learn Farsi from there. And one of our great-great-grandfather, Faiz Muhammad Khatib, came here to learn Farsi, and then he wrote the modern history of Afghanistan in early 19th century. So then when I came here in Lahore, then nobody was speaking Farsi, and nobody was speaking Urdu, either Urdu at the NCA. And for me, it was very difficult to find myself or to communicate with my other fellows. And I had to learn Urdu from my friends. I had to learn English from my friends to communicate with them. So growing up, listening to the stories of Shahnamah, which were the epic poem or the epic poem book of the Persian literature, then there's stories of Zal, there's stories of Zahak, and there's stories of Rustam, there's stories of demons, there's stories of hero, and the 7 challenges of the heroes, that how do you become a hero? You have to cross 7 challenges in your life. And then, okay, what is the first challenge of that hero? Whenever I was asking my grandmother where God is, Allah kahan hai, then she used to point to the mountain. Okay, God is behind the mountain. And in the story of the Shahnamah, the hero had to go to the mountain, climb the mountains, and go and fight the demons, fight the emperors. The enemies were behind the mountain. The friends were behind the mountain. God is behind the mountain. Demons are behind the mountain. And that mountain was the first challenge ever, my first ever challenge. I needed to climb that. And one of the stories of the Shahnamah, when Zal walking in the streets of Kabul, and then she falls in love with the princess of Kabul, Rudaba. And then the second love story was the story of Rustam when he meets the princess of Samangan. And the princess of Samangan, Tahmina, and my mother, Amina, was not letting me to climb that mountain because I was so young at that time. So for the first time when I climbed that mountain, then I realized there are mountains and mountains and mountains behind this mountain. So came here in Lahore, got admission at the NCA, and was pursuing miniature painting here. Or just before my thesis in 2003, I went back to Afghanistan, into the hometown of my grandfather, to Bamiyan, where the many, many caves, 500 families were living in that caves. And then I went to the National Archive of Afghanistan, where I found data and text about the Hazaras, where the text says the Hazaras are ugly, the Hazaras are kafir, the Hazaras are rebellious, the Hazaras live in the mountains of Bamiyan, in the caves of Bamiyan. And it was reminding me the story of the demons. The demons were living in the mountains. The demons were ugly creatures. The demons were kafir. The demons were rebellious. So the similarity of the demons, the description of the demons and the description of the Hazaras were so similar. I, as a child who were always imagining myself as a hero and going to face the 7 challenges of my life, were always having this demon, this wooden sword, and killing this imaginary demons, then all of a sudden I had to think about my own ancestors, that they were actually demonized in the theology of that region. So then I started doing an investigative drawing of the demons, that what are demons, who are these demons, and where are these demons coming from? And why the melodies of the Shahnamah, when my grandfather was singing those verses of Shahnamah, they were glorious stories, but the melodies were so lamentic so lamentic. There was no glory in that melody. And that melody goes like this. Hai bayazdana garma khiradashtim kujain saranjame badashtim. So this kind of melody, like very lamentic, very nostalgic, and also melancholic, were associated with the glory of the hero, was not actually fitting right. So there was something wrong with the entire glory of Rustam. There's something wrong with the narrative of hero in there. So looking into my grandfather, they actually escaped Afghanistan in the 1890s. They came here into India. They joined British Army. And after the partition of Pakistan and India, they moved to Pakistan. And in Pakistan, the border of Pakistan with Afghanistan, with this hope that someday Afghanistan would have a fair government and they will go and claim their land back and live happily, which never happened. And so my father was born there, and I was born, and my son was born there too. So among those challenges, the 7 challenges of life, one of the biggest challenge was standing in the shoes of a Hazara. That the day you're going to school, the children are reluctantly coming closer to you. Their parents are asking them not to get close to this guy. And then, so my father sent me into the Christian school, not to feel that pressure of the majority. And the second challenge was to the integration. How would you integrate in this society? And then I had to move away from Pakistan to Australia to get rid of that pressure here of being a Hazara. Then I started practicing in Australia. And in one of the challenges, in 2011, a crazy suicide bomber went to my parents' house and blew himself. My parents were critically injured in that. And then I brought my parents in Australia. And then I moved to Afghanistan and opened my studio there. And looking into the practice of the miniature, again looking into the demonology of that region. And all of the tangible cultural heritage of the Hazaras were blown, and the last one which was blown was the statue of Buddha of Bamiyan in Afghanistan in 2001. That was the last one. So the only way to look into the history of the Hazaras were through the intangible cultural heritage, and that was coming through our maternal lineage, where you go into the melodies, where you go into the poems, where you go into the embroideries, where you go into the dances, where you go into the rituals, in the festivals. And then, as a miniature painter, you barely hear a name of a woman in the history of miniature painting. So then I stopped doing miniature painting. And why I stopped miniature painting? Because in Afghanistan, if you asked a man that where you see yourself in coming 5 years, they would say, again, same shit, and it would be another year, another day. But if you ask a woman where you see yourself in coming 5 years, she would tell you a lot of stories that only exist in utopia. Their imagination for future is open, completely open. They are so connected to the life. So I was so depressed living in Afghanistan, looking into my own history, looking into the history of the Hazaras, how their land was captured, how they were massacred, how they ran away. And look at that narrative in the National Archive of Afghanistan about the Hazaras. And then I started doing embroidery. Just get a piece of fabric, sit in the corner of your studio, and put the thread into the needle and start doing that embroidery. And connect yourself to your maternal lineage. And finding a way, how do you practice Or how do you practice your wisdom into this intergenerational wisdom or into this intergenerational information that came to me? So then I started weaving, I started doing embroideries, and in one of the challenges of life, I lost Amina, who was injured in that suicide bombing, and I lost her. And then Rudaba was in Kabul. Zal fell in love with that. Tahmina was in Samangan. And my mother died in Sydney, teaching me that how to connect yourself to the life, how to connect yourself to the intangible cultural heritage, how this culture is important, how it is important to living in Sydney and practice your own visual language, practice your own cultural language. In Sydney, in Australia, no one knows about miniature painting. No one knows the history, the background, the elements, or the symbols that I'm using in my paintings, in my artworks. But I kept doing that. I just kept doing that because I was so connected to the life itself. As the women in Afghanistan right now, they are so connected into the life where Taliban are not allowing them being into the society. They are invisible now. But if you go to their home, you'll find a beautiful embroidery, beautiful, beautiful embroidery, where this beautiful mountain, beautiful landscape, the children playing there, their melodies, their poems written on that. And then I learned from them in Sydney, in Australia, in my own studio, creating my own embroidery, creating my own world where I'm living, where I'm so connected to the life itself. And thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you.